Hello, this is Dr. Davis. I'm going to be walking you through the first Unit 1, Module 1 in this video. So we will work on this together. So these are our objectives for this module. So we're going to talk about 6 classes of nutrients, the 3 basic functions, how to use the My Plate and the dietary guidelines, we're going to talk about food labeling and primary sources of carbs, fiber, and how carbs are digested in our body. So what is exactly good nutrition? So good nutrition is nutrients that the body needs in order to grow, for it to maintain itself, for it to keep itself healthy. We use food as a fuel. It sustains human life. It's required for all different body processes. And it's the quality of the food that the person consumes that really has a lot to do with their health, growth, and development. I don't know if you've seen people who maybe they're obese or they're heavy, and you would just by looking at them think, oh, they must have really good nutrition, right? Because they're heavy. But really, what they have is bad nutrition because maybe what I eat isn't good foods. Maybe I don't eat vegetables. Maybe I don't eat proteins, but I'm more interested in fast foods or other things that don't have a lot um, of nutrients in it. So, and the reverse is also true. You can see someone that's very, very thin and they don't have good nutrition either. So it's really about knowing what um, good nutrition looks like, and then how to help people if they are in if they have bad nutrition or malnutrition. So malnutrition can be caused by um, bad bad dietary choices, by low income, by difficulty obtaining food, and other various mental health conditions, physical conditions. Um, so there's a lot of things that go into nutrition. So table 1-2 talks about it, but it also tells us about if someone has good nutrition, then their skin is going to look good. Their hair will be shiny. Their eyes will be clear. They'll have good posture. They're alert. When you're talking to them, um, their bone structure is well developed. Good nutrition helps with emotion and stamina. It helps us with our appetite. It helps us with sleep and with elimination. So all of those things are really important when we think about nutrition. So what can we say about the American diet? So in the American diet, we believe in supersizing everything, right? It's just 20 cents more. You can get a larger French fry and a bigger drink. We don't really think about the added calories that are in those. Typically, if you're eating a supersized meal, then you're eating the calories, the amount of calories you're supposed to have an entire day, you may be consuming at one sitting because of eating this supersized portion. So there's a lot of things that we have to think about when we think about this. Um, these foods that you might be consuming are biggie fries. So yes, those are potatoes, but consumed in that amount, you get a lot of calories, you get a lot of carbohydrates, which turn into sugar. You get a lot of salt because everything's very salty. Um, so all of those things can cause issues for us later. And while we may not be hungry anymore, we're not getting good nutrition for our bodies. So in the American diet, we have an increase of fat and sodium. So those are some things that that we need to think about when we're talking about food choices. So malnutrition is a condition that results when our body doesn't have enough nutrients. Those cells in our body, they don't get a good supply of the nutrients that we need. And that can be because of different things. Either I have a poor diet, I'm not taking in enough food, something's wrong with my body and I don't process the food correctly. It also occurs when people do not or cannot eat enough food that provide essential nutrients. So some of the people that we think about when we think about malnutrition is we have two pictures here of these little children. One has the kwashiorkor, which is the where their bellies look very inflated. And then there's marasmus, which is where the children look like little old men, right? Their hair is falling out. They're very, very thin. Um, so those are two different kinds of malnutrition. Remember that I talked about nutrition that can also cause other problems. So you can have malnutrition that leads to serious health issues. Like in these children's cases, they could have stunted growths. Their eyes may not develop like they're supposed to. But diabetes and heart disease can also transpire from from malnutrition and people not able to get the nutrition that they need. So there are 6 classes of nutrients that we're going to talk about the next few slides. We're going to talk about carbohydrates, fats or lipids, proteins, vitamins, minerals, and water. So some of the things that's really important to remember is that none of these nutrients work alone. So I can't just eat a carbohydrate diet and not have vitamins, minerals, or water. Okay, I can't eat just protein and not have carbs and fats and other things. So these all work together. Our essential nutrients are nutrients that are only found in foods. So our only way to get them is through eating them. There are organic nutrients. These have to be broken down for the body to use. So those contain hydrogen, oxygen, and carbon. And then there's inorganic nutrients. They're already in their smallest components when you eat them or drink them, so they do not have to be broken down further for your body to use them. Okay, so we're going to look at on the next 2 slides those nutrients and what their main function is in the body. So carbohydrates provides energy. Fats provide energy and they give us your highest caloric value. Proteins are important for building and repairing tissues. They provide energy. So proteins are really important in your body. Vitamins help to regulate the body processes. Our inorganic nutrients, so those are the ones that are already broken down, your body can use it right away, are minerals. Those help to regulate body processes, and water, which also helps regulate body processes, but water is also really important for our cells and for hydrating our body and keeping us from being too dehydrated. So here is another slide that just kind of tells us in a brief way how what these different nutrients do in our body. So protein is really important for metabolism, energy. Um, it and fats also are part of the building blocks. So is water. These are all needed in our body in order to maintain and live a healthy lifestyle. Vitamins help with metabolism as well as minerals. Water helps with metabolism, with keeping fluids, and our carbohydrates mostly go for energy. Okay, so protein is vital for functioning. It helps build cells. It's important for growth and repair and healing. So if I was to have a broken bone or have some sort of surgery, have an illness, protein is really important to get into our patients because it really helps with that repairing of the tissues and helps them to get better. So it has hormones in it. Some of them we need. Um, the There are digestive enzymes. Those are made from proteins. Hemoglobin, so our blood is part protein. And this is really an excellent source of protein are some of the things that you see here. Of course, there are good and bad choices of protein always. So we always want to think about some of our lean meats when we're thinking about protein. Um, so there's several different things that we will talk about as we go through. Fats are also known as lipids, so you may hear either term. Um, so they have carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. So remember we said um, some of the organic nutrients had to be broken down. So fats break down, and when it breaks down in your body, you end up with some carbon and hydrogen and oxygen. So fats is that yummy stuff, right? It adds flavor. Um, it satisfies your appetite. So if you are going on a low fat diet, you're going to find that you may be more hungry than if you go on a different type of limiting diet. So that's why many people do really well with like a high protein, low carb diet, because you're able to still eat fats. And those fats are what really help keep that hunger, the appetite. I'm sorry. It helps keep you from feeling hungry. So fats also help to carry fat soluble vitamins in the blood. So you have fat soluble vitamins, which are A, D, E, and K. Those vitamins can only be broken down if there's some sort of fat in the system. Okay. There's also water soluble vitamins, but we'll talk about those in a few minutes. So fat is important for that kind of stuff. It is organic, which means it has to be broken down. Um, it does provide energy. It's necessary for the structure of body tissue, and it contains essential fatty acids that the body really requires. Okay, so vitamins. Talking about vitamins, I found this nice little picture that I on off of Google that kind of just breaks down what falls into different kinds of categories for your vitamins. So these things may fall in quite a few different categories. Um, you may find that some of the foods overlap, and you'll see them in several categories. But this is just kind of a layout of what you may see in some of the easiest ways to take care of these vitamins. So in our last slide, I told you about fat soluble vitamins. So B and C are your water soluble vitamins. So that means they need water to be broken down. Okay. Remember, our fat soluble need fat. Okay. So vitamin A is essential for eyes, the immune system, and the skin. An easy source of vitamin A is your citrus, carrots, your greens, and your milk. So very easy little picture chart here to read. I love pictures. They help me remember things better. Um, so we want to remember there's also things that they can do. We can add vitamins to food. So one of the big vitamins that we add to food is vitamin D. Do you know where we add vitamin D to? So we add vitamin D to milk, right? You'll see it in the grocery store, vitamin D milk. That means they've added that to the milk. That way we can get that vitamin in um, easier. So sunlight is a big way. So if you look on your little picture chart up here, vitamin D, you'll see sunlight in there. So sunlight's a good way to get vitamin D. But, there's a lot of risks with getting sunlight. So then we can have, skin cancers and those kind of things. So just to kind of break it up and get vitamin D in, you can buy the vitamin D milk. Okay. So our fat soluble vitamins, A, D, E, and K, those, when you cook those kind of vitamins, so if I'm cooking food that go with A, D, E, and K, so let's look at D is eggs, E is got some broccoli and some squash, maybe some olive oil in there. So those are things that are not broken down real easy. Okay, your water soluble vitamins, if you cook those, then you're going to have you're going to lose those vitamins. Your B and your C vitamins are easily destroyed by air, light, and cooking. So those vitamins B and vitamin C, you want to go ahead and prepare those fresh, especially if you're going to be eating fruit, just to prepare those fresh and go ahead and eat them. So that way you get the most of your vitamins. Okay, so this slide talks about the minerals. So there's major minerals and there's trace minerals. Um, I don't feel like this is necessarily something that you need to memorize this list. Just understand that these minerals are important and why they're important, and maybe some examples of where we can find um, these these minerals, say in food. So an easy one is potassium. You can find those in bananas. Calcium, you can find that in milk. Iron, you can find that in green leafy vegetables. So it's just some examples like that. So some of the other things that I want to kind of think about while we're on this slide. So there are things, if you are lacking in these minerals, that you can get. So iodine is on this list. So if you buy salt, you know that we have iodized salt, right? That means that we have added iodine to the salt. So people that don't get enough salt in, or iodine, I'm sorry, enough iodine in their diet, they can develop what's called a goiter. So a goiter is a mass that is usually around the base of the neck, and it's just that thyroid gland that's in their neck starts to develop this large mass, and it's from not having enough iodine in their diet. So that's something to be thinking about. Fluoride is on this list. So fluoride helps with tooth decay, right? So usually, especially if you live inside the city, the water that you drink out of the faucet has fluoride already added to it. So if you live where you have well water, you may need to add a fluoride supplement for your children to help in the forming of those teeth. Um, so some of the bad things is that you may find if you have too much of something on this list. Sodium is a good example. So if I have too much sodium um, from eating, say, processed foods, maybe I eat a lot of canned foods. I eat a lot of fast foods. Those are all high in sodium. So maybe my blood pressure is high and the doctor's going to tell me that I need to decrease my sodium intake. And to do that, I can do that by getting rid of some of those processed foods. All right, water. So water is vital for our life. So where can I find it? Right? So 80% of what we intake of water is from drinking water or other beverages. Other beverages being juices. Um, there is some water content in some of our sodas that we drink, but tea is a great way to get in some water. The best way to get in water is, of course, to drink water, but a lot of people don't like to drink water. So if you can get them to do a decaffeinated tea, and if they like to drink iced tea, if they could get the decaf version of that, that will be excellent. So it's important for us to get our water intake in. So 20% of our water intake we get from the foods that we eat. So think about especially some of your fresh vegetables like lettuces, tomatoes, cucumbers, those all have some water content to them. So we have to have water. Um, our systems won't continue to work um, without it. 60% of our body weight comes from water. So it's really important. It helps lubricate, it helps digest, it helps regulate our body temperature. And then if we're worried about not having enough fluid, we may be dehydrated. Then we'll be looking at how much does this person take in and how much do they put out. Okay, so those are some things that we need to think about when we're talking about looking at intake and output for a patient. We're concerned about how much are they sweating, how much are they peeing, how much are they pooping, are they coughing up anything, are they vomiting. So all of those are ways for us to lose water out of our system. So we will have to monitor those kind of things when we're caring for our patients. So this is a chart that is out of your book, but I felt like it really kind of showed us some different examples of good nutrition and poor nutrition. So the next 3 slides talk about nutrition. Actually, I lied. The next 4 slides, I'm sorry, talk about good and bad nutrition. So some of the good and some of the bad. So in a patient, you may see someone who is alert. By alert, I mean they're looking at me, they're able to tell me their name, they're able to tell me what, a little bit about what's going on. And a person that is has apathy is not got a good response to me. Maybe sometimes people say you're apathetic if you have no reaction to situations. So you see something happening in front of you, and instead of responding to it either in a happy or a sad, you're apathetic, meaning I have no response to it whatsoever. So I could have shiny hair or dull, lifeless hair. I'll have clear complexion or a blemished complexion. Maybe my color is very good, or maybe it's very bad. So what do I mean by bad color? So sometimes you might see someone that, whatever their racial or ethnicity, doesn't have anything to do with it. We're really looking at what is their underlying color of their skin. I am very pale, so I can tell you that when I get sick or my hemoglobin falls low, instead of I'm already pale, so I can't get paler, but what I do is my skin will turn more of a kind of a yellowy color. So that can happen. So we're looking at what is their underlying, not just their underlying color, but does it look good or does it look bad for some reason? Do your patient's eyes, are they bright and clear? Are they dull or red rimmed? Okay, so another way to look at a patient's color is looking at their gums or the inside of their mouth. So the inside of their mouth should be pink. The teeth should look good. If their gums are red or puffy, or maybe even sometimes their gums will be very pale looking, so they're not really nice and pink anymore, that's a sign that there's something wrong. Looking at their abdomen, looking at their muscles and their bone structure, all of those things are important. Is our patient of normal height and weight, or are we overweight or underweight? How is our posture? How are our emotions? What kind of stamina do I have? Do I get easily fatigued? So do I get tired easily? Or can I do a regular task without getting short-winded or feeling tired? Is our patient ill a lot, or are they very rarely ill? What kind of appetite do they have? What about sleeping? Sleeping is really important. And what kind of elimination do they have? Do they have a normal bowel pattern, or do they usually have more constipation and diarrhea? So these are all really important things to think about when we're worried about the nutritional status of our patients. So the Dietary Guidelines for Americans is a framework that takes into consideration personal, cultural, and traditional preferences, as well as budget when they're trying to work on guidelines for their patients. Poor eating habits and physical activity can lead to cardiovascular disease, high blood pressure, type 2 diabetes, sometimes cancer, and poor bone health. So it's really important that we promote health and try to reduce chronic diseases through diet and exercise. So as a healthcare professional, it's going to be really important for us to really talk to our patients about eating good, nutritious foods. My Plate is an initiative that was started by the government, the US government, to try to help patients eat healthier. So they've done different versions of this. If you were in, say, elementary or middle school in the last few years, you probably have done something with My Plate where you take a plate, divide it up, and put different foods in different areas. So some of the things that are on the website, and I put the link to the website here if you'd like to look, but it gives you advice and tips. It talks about weight management, how many calories you should take in, how much activity you should have. There's a food tracker, and there's healthy eating tips. And then our next slide is going to show us a little bit more of one of the graphics that they have on the My Plate website. So this is one of the websites that are, or one of the graphics, excuse me, that comes from the myplate.gov website. So basically what it's telling you is if you take your plate and you were to divide it into fours, then this is how much you should have in each area of your plate. Now, of course, by them telling you this is not, one of those huge kind of platter plates that we as Americans would like to see. But this is a regular dinner plate and divided into 4 sections, having smaller amounts of fruit and protein and more of grains and vegetables, and then having some sort of dairy. This also shows you about or talks about how to read the nutrition labels, how to decipher what it says, and we're going to do an activity with that in this first section of our class. So we'll talk about that a little bit in class. So when you see the word DRI or the initials DRI, what they're talking about is the dietary reference intakes. So these are both from your book, and it's just a couple different ways of showing you or showing a patient of how to divide up food. Okay, so what they're trying to do, they're trying to move Americans into eating better food. So we're trying to get them to eat more vegetables, eat more fruit. Make half of all your grains that you eat whole grains. So instead of white bread, maybe get a wheat bread. Try to consume more dairy products, more vitamin D milk than yogurt, more fat-free or low-fat dairy. Those are all really good for us. They want us to try to shift to increase the different kind of proteins that we're eating and make sure that those are healthy protein choices. Eating seafood twice a week, using legumes or nuts or seeds instead of eating meat at every meal is a good step. Going from eating solid fats to oils. So instead of using butter, margarine, shortening, or lard to cook, to try to use vegetable oil. Reduce sugar by drinking beverages that don't have sugar added. So maybe drinking a Diet Coke or a Coke Zero instead of a regular Coke. Reduce saturated fat intake. Try to reduce our sodium intake. So those are all the things that these reference intakes are working towards. In 1994, uh, food labeling became mandatory for all processed foods. This is the result of the Nutrition Labeling and Education Act. And their primary objective was to make sure that the labels on foods provides consistent nutrition information. So the Food and Drug Administration came back and they also said that this food labeling needs to be on as much food products as possible, um, because we really need to know what are people eating. We need to be able to understand what the food label says, and it needs to have a standardized layout so it's easier for us as Americans to read them. So here's another example of a food label. So if you will see on our example here, so what this label is telling us that there are four servings in this container, and each serving size is 4 ounces. So many times what happens is that we eat more than one serving. So we think we're getting the calories of 310 calories, but we don't look at the serving size, right? So I do this frequently with, you know, crackers or cookies or whatever. I look at the calories and I say, wow, it's only 300 calories. I can have this. This is a good choice for me. And while it may be, it's a good choice if I eat 3 of them, right? But if I eat, um, you know, 6 of them, then I have to remember that I'm actually doubling my calorie intake. One that's hard to remember and look at is crackers, like small, like cheese crackers or Cheez-Its. You can only have like 12 or 16 or some strange number like that. So that's something that we have to think about when we're looking at the nutrition. How many can we have for that amount of calories? So what this label is telling us is if you just eat 1 serving, it's 300 calories. But if you eat the entire container, that's 1,200 calories. Okay. Same as you go down through, it lists your fat, your cholesterol, your sodium, your carbohydrates, sugars. So all of your labels should look like this, and it should be in the same format. It should be easy to understand. It should break it down into measurements and percentage. And the percentage is going to be based on a 2,000 calorie a day diet. So that's kind of our standard, is that we base these all off of a 2,000 calorie a day diet. So it's telling you on this first line where it says total fat, 14 grams, and then the next thing says 18%. So that's considered as being 18% of your total fat for the day in 1 serving of this food. So what foods are carbohydrates? So this is probably one of my favorite food groups. I like carbs. So breads, pastas, potatoes, corns, all these other different kind of things are carbohydrates. Okay, so carbohydrates are energy foods. So they are rapidly burned in your body. They're converted into energy. It can be released as sugar sometimes into your body. So if you take in a lot of carbs, then your blood sugar may go up. Fruit has a lot of carbohydrates in it. Vegetables sometimes do. So you have to really watch what you're eating and how much intake you're having. Carbohydrates are a good filler. So rice, different things like that. If I need a filler for my meal, carbs is usually an inexpensive way of doing that. So the big thing to remember about carbs is that carbs equal energy. So typically when your body is burning carbs or you take in carbs, it converts it into sugar, into glucose. So your body has to use that up somehow. Um, Hopefully you go and exercise and use that fuel that you're burning up, but it's possible that if you don't, then that's where some of this fat stores come from. Over time, you're gaining weight. So those are things that we have to think about when we're thinking about carbohydrates. So I like this nice little diagram that I had found about what carbohydrates become, because it kind of just helps me to remember this is where what carbs do. So there are different kinds of carbohydrates. You have complex carbs that take longer to be broken down, and then simple carbs, which can be burned very quickly as sugar. If you look at the difference, you can tell why. Just because those are very simple, those are, especially your simple carbs, those have a lot of sugar content, right? Donuts, a Coke, cookies, all of those things have sugar in them that are readily available and the body can burn them. Then I found this nice little graphic about good carbs versus bad carbs. Doesn't mean don't ever have any bad carbs. It just means that you want to take them in smaller amounts. Um, so carbohydrates can be broken down into a lot of different um, sugars. So it can be broken down into glucose and lactose and sucrose. And these are all different things that are burned in your body in different ways. But the big idea with carbohydrates is to remember the more you take in, the more, excuse me, I'm so sorry, the more that's going to convert into sugar, and the more that sugar is going to have to be stored somewhere. Okay, your body has to do something with it. So if I take in large amounts of simple carbs, then I'm going to be probably someone who is overweight. So kcalorie is the same thing as a calorie. Um, they're really used interchangeably. So what we call calories, when we look at the calorie count, it's actually a kcalorie. And it's just a simple or a little bit simpler way of counting calories, because 1 kcal equals 1,000 calories. So if you had a label that said 1,000 calories or 1 kcalorie, the 1 kcalorie is easier to understand. Where 1,000 calories, you're thinking, my gracious, that's half of what I can have for the whole entire day. So um, a kcalorie is what you actually see on our labels, on our food labels, because it is just a simpler way of doing calories. Okay, so this little graphic here that I found kind of shows you how they kind of split up each other. This was found, I found this in your book, so you should be able to pull that up and look at it. So no more than 10% of our calorie intake should come from simple sugars, which is about 12 teaspoons a day. American Heart Association says that men should not have more than 9 teaspoons of added sugar a day, and women no more than 6. So that's a lot, right? I mean, not a lot, excuse me. Um, if you think about the amount of sugar that you may put in sweet tea, and if you drink a good bit of that throughout the day, that's a lot of calories coming from carbohydrates and sugar. So that's something that we need to look about and think about when we're caring for our patients. If you have somebody that's overweight, try and help them think of the ways that they can decrease the sugar. So maybe it's not going to be right away that they're going to go from drinking sweet tea to drinking unsweet tea, but maybe you can get them to start with half and half, and then slowly increase the amount of unsweet in there just to decrease the sugar. So that's one way to do that. Maybe instead of looking for a snack in the afternoon, you look at something that has some protein in it, maybe a yogurt instead of eating a cookie. So making better choices is really important when we talk about food. So how are these carbohydrates digested in our body? So the glucose is a simple sugar. It can be absorbed straight into the bloodstream. That can come from the intestines. They're carried through the liver. Um, the blood then carries the glucose to the cells. Um, all of these are done in different ways. So if I were to eat a starch, so it's going to be broken down in my mouth, right? As I swallow it, then it's going to start to be broken down a little bit more. As it moves through our digestive system, um, it is absorbed and changed into sugars by some of those enzymes in our intestinal system, and then that sugar is absorbed into the blood. So all of our carbohydrates are changed into simple sugar before they can start metabolizing into the blood. So the glucose is taken to the cells, and then the body starts to use it or store it. So typically it will be stored in liver and in the muscles, but then eventually it will be stored in fatty tissue once the body has enough of carbohydrates. Now, if you'd like a longer version of how carbohydrates metabolize, this is a nice little graphic here for you to look at. It really gets to talking about how the sugars are transformed, where it's broken down into, um, and how that works in the body. Dietary fiber is really important in our diet. Um, you may have heard it called roughage, meaning it's that food that you will eat. So if I'm having a hard time, I'm constipated. So my doctor may say, I need you to eat some green leafy vegetables. So sometimes eating a salad is a good way to help process and push that food through. There's fibers in that in those leaves. So when I'm talking about leaves, I'm talking about, if you look here, um, lettuce, spinach, any of those things are really good with pushing that food through um, and out the other end where we need to have a stool. Um, it's important, fiber is important to bulk up the stool. You don't want someone that's constantly having diarrhea. So it's really important to add fiber to the diet in order to do that. Somebody who eats a lot of one of these things, you may find they'll have a lot of stomach pains, probably gas pains. Um, so while it's good to eat these foods, you don't want to eat them in excess of what you should normally eat. It will cause a lot of gas pain. So you kind of have to really be careful with how much you're taking in. We don't want to overdo any any part of our fiber in our diet. So the health benefits of fiber is it can help you digest your food, keeps you from being constipated. It helps with weight loss because it helps if you eat something um, that is high in fiber. Some of your diet foods you'll notice are high in fiber, and that's because it processes slower going through your body, so you stay more full. You're not as hungry. It helps to maintain your blood sugar. So if I take in some carbs, if I also take in some fiber at the same time, it'll help to maintain that blood sugar. And eating high fiber can help lower our cholesterol. So those are all good things that can happen if you're increasing your fiber in your diet.